I don't usually write stuff like this, but I need to get this out of my system before I lose my mind. I'm Landon Barrett, 38 years old, financial analyst, husband, and a man who's built his life around structure. I wake up at the same time every morning, eat the same breakfast, oatmeal, coffee, one slice of toast, and hit the gym for exactly 45 minutes before work. My wife, Evelyn, has always said she loves my discipline. You make life predictable, she'd joke, and I'd take it as a compliment. Maybe I was blind to how that predictability made her bored. The shift started small. Little inconsistencies. A missed text. A call that went straight to voicemail. Evelyn has always been meticulous about keeping me updated on her schedule, where she's going when she'll be back, because she knows I value routine. But last Thursday, I came home early from a business trip, 2 days ahead of schedule. I didn't tell her because I wanted to surprise her. I never should have done that. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Normally, Evelyn would be home by then, winding down after work. Instead, there was this off feeling. A glass of wine on the counter, half drunk, lipstick smudged on the rim. But what really got me? The faint scent of cologne. Not mine. I called her. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. I checked her location, something we both have enabled for convenience, not for spying. Her office. But that didn't add up. Evelyn doesn't work late unless she tells me in advance. When she finally called me back an hour later, her voice was too chipper, too rehearsed. She said she had a huge win at work and went out for a last-minute celebration with her team. The way she said it, fast, like she was trying to fill the silence before I could question it, rubbed me the wrong way. You should have told me, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I know, baby, I'm so sorry. It was totally last minute. The pause. I'll be home soon, okay? Love you. She hung up before I could say it back. Something was wrong. I knew it, but I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. Not yet that I spent the next hour pacing around the house, trying to talk myself out of my own thoughts. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Evelyn really had just gone out with coworkers. I mean, she wasn't the type to hide things from me, right? But then I looked at the wine glass again. She never drinks alone. If she was celebrating, wouldn't she have had that glass at the restaurant? And the cologne, that wasn't mine. It was faint, but I noticed it the second I walked in. I forced myself to act normal when she came home. Evelyn walked through the door an hour later, still wearing her office clothes, her hair slightly disheveled like she'd been running her fingers through it all night. She smiled when she saw me, too wide, too forced. Baby, I missed you. She wrapped her arms around me, kissed my cheek, but I barely moved. You smell different, I said, not even thinking about the words before they came out. She pulled back, blinking. Huh. Your perfume. It mixed with something else. For the briefest second, she froze. Just a flicker. Then she laughed. Oh, yeah, one of the guys at work gave me a hug. He spilled some of his cologne on me. You know how James is, always going in for those bear hugs. Her boss. An older guy. Married. I wanted to believe her. So I nodded. Acted normal. Forced a chuckle. James needs to lay off the cologne then. She smiled, relaxed again. I know, right? She kissed me again, this time on the lips, lingering for a second longer, like she was trying to reset something between us. Then she pulled away, stretching. God, I'm exhausted. Can we just go to bed? I let it go. But my mind wouldn't. That night I barely slept. Evelyn passed out within minutes, but I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every hesitation, every detail. The wine glass. The cologne. The way she froze. I told myself I was being paranoid. But deep down I already knew the next morning. I woke up early, like I always do. Evelyn was still asleep, curled up on her side, breathing steady. She looked peaceful. Like she hadn't been out late with a lie tangled in her throat. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the wine glass. It was still there, sitting exactly where I left it. I hadn't cleaned it up yet. Maybe I wanted to see if she would. When Evelyn finally walked in, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she spotted the glass immediately. For half a second, she just looked at it. Like she had forgotten about it. Like she didn't expect to see it still sitting there. Then she smiled, stretching her arms with a yawn. Oh, I forgot to clean that up last night. I had a glass before I left. Before she left. That wasn't what she said yesterday. You told me it was last minute, I said, watching her reaction carefully. She blinked. It was. But, I poured a glass while I was getting ready, and then I didn't even finish it. Just left in a rush. It was a good save. Too good. Too prepared. I forced a small smile. Right? That makes sense. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coffee, and started scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. But something had. And I wasn't about to ignore it. Because now I knew for sure, she was lying to me that I spent the rest of the morning watching her. Not obviously, just little things. The way she kept glancing at her phone, typing quickly, locking the screen when I walked by. The way she kept the conversation light, avoiding anything too specific about last night. I told myself to wait. Be patient. If she was lying, she'd slip up eventually. And then she did. Around noon, Evelyn sighed dramatically and set her phone down. Ugh, I have so much to catch up on at work. Yesterday threw my whole schedule off. I looked up from my laptop. Yeah? What time did you get back to the office? She hesitated. It was barely noticeable. A flicker of thought before answering. I didn't. We went straight to dinner from the office. I kept my face neutral. I thought you said it was last minute? She let out a small laugh. There was. I meant, like, we decided at the end of the day. No time to come home and change, that's why I was still in my work clothes. A perfectly reasonable explanation. If I hadn't already caught her changing the story. First, she said she had a glass of wine before she left. Then she said the dinner was last minute. Now she's saying they planned it at the end of the day. Which one was it? I nodded slowly, pretending to buy it. Got it. Where'd you guys go again? She grabbed her phone and started scrolling. Avoiding eye contact. Oh, that new place on Fifth. The Italian one. I made a mental note. Evelyn stood up, stretching. I should get dressed. I might go into the office for a bit. I raised an eyebrow. On a Saturday? She waved me off. Just for an hour or two. Gotta make up for lost time. Then she kissed my forehead and walked off to the bedroom. I waited until I heard the shower turn on. Then I grabbed my keys and decided to do some checking of my own. Because I wasn't buying a single word of it. I drove straight to Evelyn's office. If she was lying about where she was, I needed to know. Her firm was in a sleek glass building downtown, always buzzing with activity during the week. But on a Saturday? Practically deserted. I parked across the street and waited. If she really was coming in, she'd show up soon. She never did. After an hour, I checked the time. Evelyn had already left the house by now. If she wasn't here, where was she? I pulled out my phone and searched for the Italian restaurant she had mentioned. It was easy to find, new place, great reviews. And luckily for me, they had an Instagram page. I scrolled through their latest posts, scanning for anything from the night before. And then I found it. A group photo. Staff and guests. The caption read, "Another amazing Friday night. Thank you to all our wonderful guests for joining us. Tag yourselves." I zoomed in. Evelyn wasn't in the picture. Neither were any of her coworkers. I checked the comments. Someone had asked, "How late were you guys open last night?" The restaurant replied, "We closed at 9:30. Can't wait to see you all again soon." 9:30. Evelyn didn't come home until nearly midnight. Where was she for those missing hours? I sat back in my seat, gripping the wheel. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. She was lying. And I had just caught her. Now, I just had to figure out why I drove home with my mind racing. She lied about work. She lied about dinner. And there were hours missing. Hours where she was, what? With someone? Doing something she didn't want me to know about? I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had proof. When I got back, Evelyn was already home, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just spent the morning lying to my face. "Hey babe," she said without looking up. Work was exhausting. Glad I didn't stay longer. I studied her carefully. She wasn't tense. Wasn't nervous. She really thought I believed her. I forced a smile. "Yeah? Get everything done?" She nodded. "Mostly." Then she set her phone down and stretched. "What about you? What did you do this morning?" This was a test. If I told her I checked her office and she panicked, I'd have my answer. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. "Just errands," I said casually, sitting beside her. "Picked up some stuff for the house." She hummed, satisfied. No suspicion. No idea that I was already unraveling her story. Now I needed to find out where she actually was. That night, while Evelyn showered, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. She never locked it around me. I opened her recent calls. Paul reading. My stomach dropped. She had mentioned him before, some guy she knew from networking events. Nothing serious. Or so I thought. I checked the call logs. She had talked to him 3 times yesterday. One call right before she left for dinner. Another at 10:17 p.m., after the restaurant was already closed. So that's where she was. I locked her phone and set it down just as the shower turned off. My heart was pounding, but I kept my breathing even. Act normal. Don't let her see. Evelyn stepped out in her towel, smiling. "What are you thinking about?" I smiled back. "Nothing, babe. Just tired." She walked over, kissing my cheek. "I missed you last night, you know." Liar. I forced a chuckle. "Yeah." She climbed into bed, curling up beside me like nothing was wrong. I wrapped my arm around her, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I'd find out exactly what she was doing with Paul's. The next morning, Evelyn was all smiles. Making breakfast, humming to herself, acting like nothing was wrong. Like she didn't just spend Friday night doing God knows what with Paul. I played along. Acted normal. But my mind was already 3 steps ahead. I needed to confirm if she was with him. And I knew exactly how to do it. After she left for her usual Sunday brunch with her friends, or so she said, I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Paul Reading wasn't some random name. She had mentioned him in passing months ago. A business connection. Someone she'd bumped into at networking events. I found his LinkedIn easily. Tech consultant. Early 40s. Married. But no pictures of his wife anywhere. I kept digging, checking his social media. Nothing suspicious. Until I found his address. Upscale neighborhood. Big house. Not far from the restaurant Evelyn supposedly went to. And just like that, I had my next move. I drove out to his neighborhood later that afternoon. I needed to see it with my own eyes. His house sat on a quiet street lined with perfect hedges and expensive cars. And there it was, parked right in his driveway. Evelyn's car. My stomach twisted. I pulled over a few houses away, gripping the wheel. She was here. I checked my phone. 12:47 p.m. Brunch should still be happening. So why was she at Paul's house instead? I waited. But the blinds were shut. No movement. But I knew she was inside. Minutes dragged by. I stared at her car, my mind racing with possibilities. What was she doing in there? How long had this been going on? I had all the proof I needed. But instead of storming in, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, feeling something inside me crack. She was cheating. I knew it now. And she had no idea that I knew. I sat in my car for over an hour, staring at Evelyn's car in Paul Reading's driveway. My hands were clenched so tight around the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe right. My entire body felt locked in place, frozen by the weight of what I was seeing. She was inside. Right now. With him. Lying to me without a second thought. At 2:06 p.m., the front door opened. My pulse spiked. Evelyn stepped out first, adjusting her blouse like she was fixing herself. Paul followed, standing too close, his hand brushing her lower back for half a second before she took a step forward. She was laughing, shaking her head at something he said. It looked comfortable. Too comfortable. She glanced around, probably checking if anyone was watching, but her eyes never landed on my car. Then she walked to hers, got in, and drove off like it was just another casual Sunday. I waited until she was out of sight before I let out a breath. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisting into knots. I wasn't ready to go home yet. Not ready to face her. So instead I followed. I kept my distance, making sure she didn't spot me, watching as she drove across town and pulled into a coffee shop near the restaurant she claimed to have gone to on Friday. And then she did something that almost made me laugh out loud. She took a selfie. She fluffed her hair, tilted her head, and took a picture of herself with her coffee. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from her. "Brunch was amazing. Look how cute this place is." The picture attached, freshly taken, a little too perfect. I almost wanted to applaud her. The effort. The commitment to the lie. She wasn't just cheating. She was covering her tracks like a professional. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could call her out right now. Send her a picture of her car in Paul's driveway. Ask her how her brunch was. Watch her scramble. But no, not yet. I locked my phone, started my car, and drove home. She wanted to play this game? Fine. I'd let her think she was winning. But from this moment on, she had no idea that I was watching every move she made. I got home before Evelyn, sat at the kitchen table and waited. My mind was strangely calm, like I had already accepted what I saw. She was cheating. I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew. But I wasn't going to let her know that. Not yet. The door opened at 3:12 p.m. Evelyn walked in, her purse over her shoulder, sunglasses perched on her head like she hadn't just spent the afternoon at another man's house. She smiled the second she saw me. "Hey babe, you wouldn't believe how long the line was at that cafe. Totally worth it, though." She walked over and kissed me. A real kiss. Full of warmth, like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't sneaking around. I looked at her, forcing my expression to stay neutral. "Yeah? What did you get?" She grabbed her phone and showed me the same picture she had just texted. "This. Look how cute this cup is." I nodded. "Looks nice." She sat across from me, stretching her arms. I needed that after the week I had. You know how stressful work's been. The same job she lied about going to yesterday. I played along, asking her about brunch, letting her fill in the gaps of her story, pretending I believed every word. She was so casual, so at ease. And that's what really got to me. How easy it was for her to lie to my face. That night, as she curled up beside me in bed, sighing contentedly, I kept my eyes open, staring at the ceiling. She thought she had me fooled. The next few days were unbearable. Every morning, I'd wake up next to Evelyn, listen to her tell me about her long day at work or how exhausted she was from meetings, and I'd nod along, pretending I wasn't picturing her in Paul's house. But I wasn't just waiting around anymore. I was planning. On Tuesday, I left work early and went back to Paul's neighborhood. I wasn't expecting anything, just wanted to see. Maybe prove to myself that I wasn't being paranoid. But as I turned the corner onto his street, I spotted her car. Middle of the afternoon. She should have been at work. She wasn't. I pulled over a few houses away, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse steady. I wasn't even surprised this time. Just watching her car sit there, right where it didn't belong. I checked my phone. Opened our texts. "Me, how's work?" A few minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed. "Evelyn, so busy. Back-to-back meetings today. Can't wait to come home and just relax." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. She was inside another man's house, lying to me in real time, acting like she was buried under spreadsheets and emails. I wanted to text back something sharp, something that would shake her. But I didn't. Instead, I locked my phone and kept watching. At 4:37 p.m., she walked out. Alone. Hair slightly messy, adjusting the strap of her bag. She didn't even look around this time. Just got into her car, like this was normal. Like she had done it a dozen times before. I let her leave before I pulled away myself, driving in the opposite direction, my head pounding. She was comfortable now. Confident. That meant one of two things. Either she thought I'd never find out, or she didn't care if I did. I wasn't sure which was worse. That night, I decided to push her. Just a little. See how deep she'd go to protect this lie. We were eating dinner when I casually asked, "How was work?" She groaned, rolling her eyes. "Awful. I barely had time to eat lunch." I stabbed a piece of chicken with my fork. "Yeah? What time did you eat?" She barely hesitated. "Like 1?" Maybe 1:30? I nodded slowly, keeping my expression unreadable. What did you get? She laughed. But, you jealous of my sad office salad? I forced a chuckle. Just curious. She waved her hand. It was boring. Some grilled chicken thing from the cafe downstairs. Not worth remembering. I just nodded and took another bite. I had watched her walk out of Paul's house at 4:37 p.m. She hadn't been at her office. Hadn't been eating lunch at some cafe. But she didn't even hesitate. She lied so easily. She wasn't just cheating. She had gotten good at it. That night, as we lay in bed, she curled into me like nothing was wrong. Like we weren't slowly unraveling. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing, my mind working overtime. She thought she was untouchable. She had no idea what I was about to do, that I wasn't just going to sit around anymore. I needed to catch her outright. No more guessing. No more second-guessing myself. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof, not just for my own sanity, but so she couldn't twist the story when I finally confronted her. The next day, I left for work at my usual time. Or at least, that's what I let her believe. I parked my car a few blocks away, out of sight, and waited. If she was cheating again, she'd fall into her routine. At 10:42 a.m., she texted me. Evelyn, morning, babe. Hope work isn't too crazy today. Love you. A normal message. Too normal. Like she was keeping things steady, making sure I wasn't suspicious. I didn't respond. Just kept waiting. At 11:57 a.m., she left the house. I kept my distance, trailing her as she drove across town. She didn't go to work. She went straight back to Paul's house. She pulled into his driveway like she had done it 100 times before, got out, and let herself in. No knocking. No hesitation. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't new. This was a routine. I snapped a picture of her car in the driveway. Then another of the front door. I wasn't sure why, maybe to remind myself that this was real, that I wasn't making it up in my head. That my wife was inside another man's house while she thought I was at work. I sat there for hours. Waiting. Thinking. At 3:15 p.m., she finally came out. Hair slightly messy, adjusting her blouse the same way she had the last time. She checked her phone, smiling at something, maybe at him. Then she got in her car and drove off. I let her get ahead, then followed her home. When I walked in through the door, she was already in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. She turned, flashing me a bright smile. Hey babe, how was work? I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. She was testing me, watching my reaction, making sure her little world wasn't crumbling yet. I forced a small smile. Long. You? She sighed dramatically. Exhausting. You know how it is. Yeah. I did. I walked over, kissed her on the cheek. She leaned into it, warm and familiar. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. I had my proof. Now, I just needed to decide what to do with it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Evelyn slept soundly beside me. Her breathing was soft, even. Like she had nothing to hide. I kept thinking about the way she walked into Paul's house so casually, the way she smoothed her clothes when she left. She had done this before. Many times. Probably for weeks, maybe months. She wasn't even trying to cover her tracks. That's what made me sick. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a decision. Over and over again. I needed more. More than just pictures of her car. More than just my gut feeling. I needed undeniable, in her face, no way to talk her way of it proof. So I pushed a little further. The next morning, I waited until she was in the shower before I checked her phone again. No messages from Paul. She was careful. Too careful. But she wasn't perfect. I opened her Uber app, checking her ride history. And there it was. Multiple trips to Paul's neighborhood. Some from weeks ago. Some even during the days I was out of town. I scrolled, heart pounding, my hands gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. One trip stood out. Last Friday. The night she told me she had gone to dinner with her coworkers. Drop-off location, Paul's house. Pick-up time, 11:23 p.m. So that's where she was for those missing hours. I locked the phone and put it back on the nightstand just as the shower turned off. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisting into knots. I had her. She stepped out of the bathroom a few minutes later, towel wrapped around her body, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. "Morning," she said, leaning down to kiss me. I kissed her back. Watched her as she got dressed. I wanted to say something right then. Call her out. Watch her face crumble. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed her to keep lying. To keep thinking she was in control. Because the moment I confronted her, I wanted to see the exact second she realized she had lost everything that I spent the next 2 days playing the perfect husband. Asking about her day, acting interested in her stories, kissing her goodbye in the morning like nothing had changed. Like I wasn't watching her every move. And Evelyn? She played her part too. Smiling, laughing, telling me she loved me, sneaking around behind my back like she wasn't one wrong step away from getting caught. But I had all the proof I needed now. I knew where she went. I knew when she went. I knew she had been lying straight to my face for weeks, maybe months. Now, I just needed her to confirm it. On Thursday morning, over breakfast, I set the trap. "So," I said casually, stirring my coffee. "You're staying late at work today?" She looked up from her phone, blinking. "What? Yeah. Meetings. Lots of meetings." I nodded slowly. "Tough week?" She sighed dramatically. "You have no idea." "I did." I sipped my coffee. "Well, maybe I can swing by and bring you dinner or something. Keep you company for a bit." I watched her face carefully. The tiniest flicker of hesitation. Then she smiled. "That's sweet, babe, but I'll probably just grab something from the cafe. I don't want you going out of your way." I set my cup down. "I don't mind." She forced a little laugh. "No, really. I'll be fine. I don't even know what time I'll be done, so it might not be worth it." There was the excuse, the deflection, the rejection. I leaned back in my chair, nodding. "All right, just let me know if you change your mind." She smiled, stood up, and kissed me on the forehead. "I will. Love you." Then she grabbed her bag and walked out the door, completely unaware that I was already 5 steps ahead of her. I gave her a 15-minute head start before I left the house. She wasn't at work. Of course she wasn't. By 12:15 p.m., she was back at Paul's house. This time, I didn't just park a few houses away. I drove past, slow enough to get a good look. The front blinds were open slightly, just enough for me to see inside. And there she was. My wife. Sitting on Paul's couch, legs tucked under her, wine glass in hand, completely at ease. Paul walked in from the kitchen, sat beside her, and put his hand on her thigh. And she let him. Like it was nothing. Like it was normal. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. It was one thing to suspect. One thing to find the proof. But actually seeing it? Watching it happen with my own eyes? That did something to me. I could have gotten out of the car. Walked up to the door. Banged on it until she opened it and had no choice but to face me. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't going to give her the easy way out. I wasn't going to let her cry and apologize and beg for forgiveness while still sitting on his couch. I wanted her to think she was safe. I wanted her to keep digging her own grave. So instead, I drove off, already knowing exactly how this was going to end. I spent days watching Evelyn lie to me, waiting for the right moment. I had every piece of evidence. The pictures, the location data, the call logs. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want her to just admit it. I wanted her to squirm. I wanted her to feel the weight of every single lie she had told, to watch her struggle as she realized just how deep she had buried herself. So I let her go through the motions one last time. Let her think she was in control. And tonight? Tonight was the last act in her little performance that I planned everything down to the smallest detail. Timing was key. Evelyn had settled into a routine, leaving midday to go to Paul's, then returning home like nothing had happened. And I knew today wouldn't be any different. That morning, she kissed me goodbye, her lips soft against mine, eyes full of warmth. "See you later," she said, grabbing her bag. "I'll probably be home a little late. You know how it is." I just smiled. "Yeah, I know." She had no idea I had already checked her calendar. She had no meetings today. I watched her leave, then I waited. Gave her enough time to think she was safe. Then, just like before, I followed her. She didn't even hesitate. Straight to Paul's house. This time, I parked closer. Close enough to see inside the window. Close enough to watch. And what I saw made my stomach turn. Paul opened the door the second she stepped out of her car, smiling. He leaned in and kissed her. Not on the cheek. Not some innocent greeting. A kiss. The kind that had no hesitation. She kissed him back. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. Then they went inside, closing the door behind them. I should have felt anger. Should have wanted to kick the door down, drag her out, make her face what she had done. But all I felt was disgust. Not just for her. For myself. For every single time I had kissed her, held her, loved her while she had been doing this behind my back. I took out my phone, snapped one last picture. The final nail in her coffin. Then I drove home and waited. At 7:24 p.m., the door opened. "Babe?" Evelyn called out, setting her bag down. "I'm home." I sat at the kitchen table, wine poured, dinner plated. Just like any other night. "In here," I called back, keeping my voice steady. She walked in, smiling. Smells amazing," she said, kissing my cheek. "You're the best." I watched her sit down, take a sip of her wine, completely unaware that this was the last meal we'd ever have together. "How was work?" I asked. She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Exhausting. Meetings all day." I tilted my head. "Yeah? What kind of meetings?" She barely hesitated. "Just client stuff." "Boring." I took a slow sip of my drink. "I actually stopped by your office today." Her hand froze mid-reach for her fork. "Oh," she said, forcing a little laugh. "Why?" "I was in the area," I said. "Thought I'd surprise you. But your receptionist said you weren't in all day." A small flicker of something crossed her face. Panic. But she recovered quickly. "Oh well yeah," she said smoothly. "I was at an off-site meeting. The Hilton downtown." I nodded slowly. "That's funny." She took another sip of wine, trying to look casual. "Why?" "Because I checked." I set my phone down on the table, tapping the screen. "No corporate events at the Hilton today. No bookings from your company either." Her face changed. The color drained slightly, but she tried to play it off. "Maybe I got the name wrong," she said with a nervous little laugh. "You know how these things are." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "No more games." "I also checked your Uber history." Silence. I tapped my screen again, scrolling. Funny thing, I didn't see a trip to the Hilton. But I did see a drop-off at Paul Reading's house. And not just today. Every week. Multiple times. Evelyn's entire body went still. I stared at her, letting the moment stretch. Letting her feel it. "Do you think his wife knows?" I asked softly. She let out a short, sharp laugh, fake. Desperate. "What? Who's Paul?" The last lie. I let the silence hang between us for a second. Then, without looking away, I turned my phone toward her. The picture of her car in Paul's driveway. The screenshot of her Uber ride. And finally, the one I had taken from outside his house. The one of her sitting on his couch, wine glass in hand. She stared at it, her breathing uneven, hands trembling slightly. She knew she was caught. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words. No excuses. I leaned back in my chair, watching her. "Try again," I said, my voice calm. "Who's Paul?" She swallowed hard. Her eyes darted around, like she was searching for an escape. Then, finally, her face cracked. "Landon," she whispered. I can explain." I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "I'd love to hear it." Her hands gripped the table. "It's not what you think." I arched an eyebrow. "It's not?" I gestured at my phone. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what I think." She shook her head, eyes shining with something, tears, maybe. "I was going to tell you." "Really?" I said, tilting my head. "Before or after you screwed him again?" She flinched. "Landon, please." I pushed my chair back, standing. "But don't say my name like that." She stood too, reaching for me. I stepped back. "No, I said, voice firm. You don't get to touch me. Not after this. Tears slipped down her cheeks. It was a mistake. A mistake? I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. A mistake is sleeping with someone once, feeling guilty, and confessing. This was a choice. Over and over again. She wiped her face, voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. Yeah, I said coldly. Because you sure as hell didn't try to stop. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't interested anymore. I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Landon, she choked out. Where are you going? I turned back, meeting her desperate gaze. To go be anywhere but here. Then I walked out, and I didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house, in that moment, standing in front of the woman who had spent months betraying me. So I drove. I let the road take me anywhere but there. My hands were gripping the wheel too tightly, my chest heavy with the weight of it all. I should have felt relieved. I had done it. I had confronted her. She had nothing left. No more lies. No more excuses. But all I felt was hollow. Because no matter how much I wanted to hate her, no matter how disgusted I was, I had still loved her. That was the worst part of it. That some part of me, some pathetic, broken part, still wanted her to tell me this wasn't real. That it was some kind of misunderstanding. But it wasn't. It was real. She did this. She chose him over and over, while still coming home to me, kissing me, telling me she loved me, texting me heart emojis like she wasn't lying through her teeth. I pulled into an empty parking lot and shut off the engine. Just sat there. The silence felt suffocating. My hands were shaking. My head was pounding. How did I get here? How did my life turn into this? I stayed in that lot for almost an hour, staring at my phone. At her last text. Love you, Redheart, be home soon. I almost laughed. How many times had she texted me those exact words? How many times had she sent me a kiss emoji after climbing out of Paul's bed? The anger came back. Burning. I opened our messages and typed out 2 words. I know. Then I blocked her. I blocked her on everything. Calls. Social media. I didn't care what she had to say. I had given her the chance to confess. I had sat across from her at that dinner table, looked her in the eyes, and given her one last chance to be honest. And she had still lied. She didn't deserve an explanation. She didn't deserve access to me anymore. That'd be why the time I got back home, it was almost midnight. The house was dark except for the dim glow from the living room. She was sitting on the couch, curled up in one of my hoodies, her face streaked with dried tears. She looked up the second I stepped inside. Landon. Her voice cracked. I thought you weren't coming back. I didn't respond. Just walked past her, straight to the bedroom. She followed. Of course she did. Can we talk? She pleaded, standing in the doorway. Please? I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. Her breath hitched. What are you doing? I didn't answer. She took a step forward, her voice panicked now. Landon, stop, please. Let's talk about this. I zipped the bag and finally turned to look at her. Talk about what? My voice was flat. Emotionless. Her lip trembled. About us. I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head. There is no us. Her face crumpled. That's not true. I grabbed my toothbrush, shoved it into my bag. Evelyn, let me ask you something. She wiped at her tears. Anything. I met her eyes. Did you ever feel guilty? She opened her mouth. Hesitated. Then whispered, this. I studied her for a second. Then why didn't you stop? Silence. Her hands clenched into fists. I don't know, she choked out. Landon, I was stupid. I wasn't thinking. I never wanted to hurt you. I scoffed. You never wanted to hurt me? You didn't just hurt me, Evelyn. You destroyed us. She took another step forward, her voice desperate. I love you. No, I said, shaking my head. You don't. Yes, I do. I exhaled sharply, looking up at the ceiling for patience. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. Her breath came out shaky. I made a mistake. I laughed bitterly. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in an argument. You didn't just make a mistake, Evelyn. You had a whole other life behind my back. Tears ran down her face. I don't want to lose you. I picked up my bag. You already did. She grabbed my arm. Landon, please. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, I pulled away, staring at her. How do you fix this? My voice was low, dangerous. Tell me. How do you erase months of lying? How do you take back every kiss you gave him? Every time you told me you loved me while sneaking around behind my back? Tell me how we fix that. She had no answer. I stepped past her, walked toward the door. You know the worst part? I said without turning around. She didn't answer. The worst part is that I actually believed you, I said. I trusted you more than anyone. And you took that trust and burned it to the ground. I reached for the doorknob. She sobbed. Where are you going? I turned back, staring at her one last time. Somewhere you don't exist. Then I walked out that I didn't look back. Didn't second-guess myself. I drove to a hotel, checked in, and just breathed. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt free. No more pretending. No more playing dumb while she lied to my face. No more feeling like I was losing my mind while she gaslit me into believing she was the perfect wife. I was done. By morning, I had already called a lawyer. By the end of the week, divorce papers were filed. I didn't care about fighting over assets. I just wanted out. Evelyn tried to reach me. Emails, calls from different numbers, messages through mutual friends. I ignored every single one. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of closure. Because she didn't deserve it. She made her choice. And now, she had to live with it took months to fully heal. To stop feeling like I had wasted years of my life on someone who never really loved me the way I loved her. I heard through mutual friends that she was a mess. That Paul had ended things with her once he realized she wasn't leaving me for him. That she had tried to get back into dating, but it never worked out. I didn't care. I had my life back. And I was never going to let someone like her near it again.